Hello everyone. It is time for our bunching onions tutorial. I'm going to take a second to sign in on my phone because this tutorial is actually live in our Shared Legacy Farms CSA Facebook group. So that way I will be able to see if we have any questions as the tutorial goes on. Like I said, today's tutorial is about bunching onions, or these big guys here that a lot of times show up in your CSA box. They're actually one of my favorite things to get, although they tend to linger in my refrigerator for a decent amount of time. But they're pretty versatile. You can use them in a lot of different stuff. So we call these bunching onions with Shared Legacy Farms, but people also call them green onions or scallions or a salad onion or a spring onion. Technically these are scallions because they're so long and you're getting the entire part of the plant, which is actually entirely edible. So whereas a lot of people think they just are going to eat this bottom portion here, you can actually eat the entire portion, which is super cool. So nothing needs to go to waste. So we will have our ebook in the comments. So our ebook has a lot of the recipes that we're using today, some other variations of some things in addition to how to store onions, how to choose them, all that fun stuff. So just to get started, when you get these guys home, you don't need to wash them or worry about washing them right away, but you do need to store them in the refrigerator, and you can store them a few different ways. So I am going to start just by chopping off the tops here. Loosen a little bit. And I'm going to throw them in this bowl because, like I said, these are totally edible. So I'm actually going to chop these up finely and freeze them, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to freeze them separately because they're not something I'm going to worry about using this week or the next week. So I'm going to set that aside. You've got different colors of bunching onions. We've got these like standard white ones. We've also got purple ones. You use them interchangeably. Use them the same way. So first way to store bunching onions is like a flower. So I've got this jar here with about 1 inch or 2 of water. I'm actually just going to store it root side down so the roots are in the water, and then you would simply just cover this with a plastic bag in your refrigerator. And that's the ideal way to store them. They're going to last 2 or 3 weeks when you store them like a flower. You do have to change out the water every 2 to 3 days, but that's the best way to store them. If you don't have room to store them like a flower, you can also just store them in a plastic bag in your refrigerator. So that's another easy option. They'll stay good for at least a week, if not longer this way. Probably gonna be able to guarantee like 3 weeks this way. So 2 different options as far as storage goes. As far as these tops go, I would just rinse them off with some cold water and then dry them a little bit. Chop them up finely. They have like kind of a chivy taste, and I would throw them in a freezer bag just like this. You don't need to blanch them. And this is something that I learned from a fellow CSA member. And you can just add these to stir fries or to soups all year long. So they definitely add like an oniony, chivy type flavor, but they're not super strong as far as an onion piece goes. If you don't feel like chopping them up, you can also add them to your veggie scrap bag. And we have a great tutorial on how to make vegetable broth from your veggie scraps. So definitely don't get rid of a part of your bunching onions. Alright, so you've got them stored, and then how do you use these guys? So when you pull them out, you want to rinse them off with some cold water or wash them. I've got these guys here that I pulled that are already rinsed off. They're in the same family, obviously, as other onions. They're not necessarily a miniature onion. They are a different species. But they're in the same family as leeks, as onions, as garlic, as the allium family, which means they are super, super loaded with nutrients. Bunching onions are actually the closest to a wild onion, and they have up to 140 times the phytonutrients that a regular sweet onion has. So most of those nutrients are actually found in the green part. So that's why we want to make sure that we don't throw it away. So when we're talking nutrient content, don't get rid of the green stuff. Alright, so when you go to use these guys, you're usually just going to peel off the outer layer. I'm going to do that with these here. Peel off the outer layer. Sometimes you'll feel that there's like a little bit of like a slimy membrane under here, and you can also just kind of peel that off, although you don't have to. I mean, it's not bad to eat it. I'm going to throw all these in my freezer scrap bag anyways, probably for some broth. So just lightly peel off that outer layer. If you feel that sliminess, you can peel it off, but like I said, you don't have to. So then we're going to cut off these little hairy tops here, these little roots. And then depending on what we want to do with them, we might chop them differently. So you can eat these raw, or you can eat these bunching onions cooked. This bottom white part here tastes more onion-like, whereas the greener part tastes a little bit lighter like chive. So a lot of people, even if they don't necessarily enjoy raw onions in their salad, a lot of times don't mind the raw bunching onions, so they're a lot milder. You'll also notice when you go to cut them up, they don't necessarily make you cry or make your eyes water as much as some of the other onions, which I really like. So I don't necessarily like raw onions in my salad, but I do like bunching onions. So I definitely am willing to kind of eat these raw. So one good way to use bunching onions is going to be for breakfast. So first meal of the day. So you can sprinkle them on top of scrambled eggs, or in some scrambled eggs, or in an omelet and frittata. A lot of people, if they're just having fried eggs with maybe some hash or some fried potatoes, they just might sprinkle some green onions on top. So when you have them sort of like a flour, it's really easy just to kind of grab one out and sprinkle on top of your eggs. I think it goes fantastic. I prefer them to a regular onion. You can also use them in stir fries, the entire thing. So like I said, you could use this part of the onion. Anytime I make a stir fry, I will also grab them out of the freezer, those darker green tops, and add that into a stir fry. Using it as a condiment is probably kind of a good thing to have in mind when you have these in your refrigerator. So on top of a soup, or on top of some chili, or on top of a salad, those are some of my favorite ways to use them, is just to kind of add some flavor. Someone in our CSA group actually posted this week that she had like a frozen burrito bowl or something from Costco, you know, kind of something that would be considered more of a convenience food, and she spiced it up by adding a bunching onion chopped up on top. So you can definitely add some flavor and some nutrition. Remember, you've got 140 times more nutrients in some of these bunching onions compared to a regular sweet onion. So just adding a little bit to your foods can be fantastic. Chicken salad, potato salad, egg salad, that's one of our go-tos over the summer, is to make a really hearty chicken, or potato and egg salad, and I will add a bunch of bunching onions to it. I really prefer the taste of some of those more standard raw onions. I think I already mentioned throwing them onto a sandwich. So a sandwich is also a really easy way to use them. Add some color and some nutrition. Let's see, I think I've got like a total of 12 ways here. Steam or grill them. So you can actually steam or grill them whole, which is one of my stepdad's favorite things to do, is he will just take an entire green onion or scallion, If he's putting it on the grill, he'll wrap some in foil with a little bit of garlic and butter and grill them that way, or just to steam them and use them as an additional side to some other veggies. So you could definitely just cook the entire thing whole if you want to. Adding it to baked potatoes or any type of potato dish. So hash, fried potatoes, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes. You can add it while you're cooking those things to definitely add some flavor, or you could just add it on top like you would a condiment. Meats like meatloaf, meatballs, burgers, definitely can pack some flavor into your more ground meat dishes. The other way that a lot of people use them is to dress up some of their condiments. So they might throw them in some sour cream, or maybe even throw them in a dressing that they really enjoy. I like to make a really simple dressing with some of the green onions. It's going to keep in the fridge for at least a week, if not 2. And it's pretty flavorful and it's pretty simple. So I'm just going to use a mason jar here and kind of measure as I go. I've got a clove of garlic sitting in the bottom here. And I'm going to add almost a cup of olive oil. I like to use these mason jars because I can see my measurements on the side, so it's kind of one less thing I have to worry about dirtying while I'm making these. So I've got about 3/4 of a cup of olive oil. And then I've got about 1/4 of a cup of chopped up parsley. So we got some parsley in our CSA box with Shared Legacy Farms this week, so I thought that would be a good, easy thing to kind of add. And then we're going to use about 1/2 cup of chopped green onion, which I have here. So some people will just use that white portion of the green onion. I like to use the entire thing. Like I said, they kind of have 2 different tastes. So I'm going to add, I think that was about 4 green onions chopped up, maybe about 1/2 cup. And I'm using the white part and the darker green part. I already have my garlic in there. In this cup here, I have about 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. You could sub out a different vinegar if you wanted to. So 1 tablespoon of lemon and 3 tablespoons of vinegar. I just use your standard white vinegar. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt. A little bit of pepper. I'm not going to add any sugar to this, but some people might add a little bit of sugar. I tend to kind of avoid adding sugar when I can, although I do sometimes. And then I'm going to shake this up. And I'm just going to kind of let those onions and parsley marinate in this container. I'm going to keep this in my refrigerator. It's going to be good for at least a week, if not longer. So that's a fantastic way to use a decent amount of bunching onions and to have a really clean, flavorful dressing. Dressing and condiments are one thing that I try to avoid at the grocery store. They're loaded with preservatives and so much added sugar and kind of things I like to stay away from. So I really enjoy the CSA season when I can make a lot of that stuff myself with things that I already have in my freezer or have in my kitchen. So making a dressing or dressing up a condiment that maybe you already have. So good, easy way to use those bunching onions. You can also preserve the bunching onions. So if you feel like you're kind of on overload, you're not using them up, maybe they're starting to go bad, you've got 2 options. You can pickle green onions. Usually you do just pickle that bottom portion, that more white portion, so you could chop up the top and freeze those darker parts. We've got a great recipe, easy recipe to pickle the bunching onions in our ebook, so you'll have to check that out in the comments. Or you can also freeze them. So freezing, I already mentioned you can freeze that top part. You can also freeze that bottom part using what we call like the throw in a bag method, or the throw in bag method. which means you don't have to do any blanching or anything fancy before you freeze it. So I would just take some of my green onions or scallions here, and I would want them chopped up into the sizes that I prefer to use when I'm cooking. I'm going to throw them in this freezer safe bag. I've got it labeled. Squeeze the air out, and that is it. I can throw these in my freezer and they will be good for at least 8 months, if not longer. And I can continue to use them in soups and stir fries. They're not going to obviously be as crispy once they're frozen, but they're going to be fantastic in cooked dishes. So definitely an easy kind of exit strategy is just throw them in a bag and freeze them if you have to. The other thing that I thought I would do today is make some veggie pancakes, because that seems to be a pretty well accepted, popular thing in our CSA group. So in these veggie pancakes, I'm actually going to use some of the bunching onions finely chopped up here. I also shredded some carrots and some zucchini, which we got in our box this week. So I'm making a really small batch right now, but you can obviously make more. I've got about 1/2 cup of shredded zucchini and 1/2 cup of shredded carrots, and a little bit more of the onions, although I don't have to use all of those. So to shred those up, I actually just used this grater because I didn't have to shred a ton, but you can also use your food processor to grate those up and shred them finely. You do want them shredded into a fairly small size. So I'm going to have 2 different bowls here. Pretty simple. I'm making a small batch, so I am going to just use about 1/4 cup of flour. I've just got this like gluten-free all-purpose flour. A little bit more. I know some people will make a veggie pancake and will use more eggs and maybe not flour, but this didn't call for that much, and I think this flour will turn out nicely. So I've got 1/4 cup of flour. I'm going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. And 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And a little bit of pepper. So 1/4 cup flour, 1/4 teaspoon baking powder, quarter teaspoon salt, a little bit of pepper. Like I said, this is a small batch. I've got some coconut oil in this cast iron skillet back here. Actually, I'll use this one closer to me. So I'll get that melted. A little bit of coconut oil in the skillet. And then in this bowl here, I'm going to put my veggies. So I've got about 1/2 cup of shredded zucchini, about 1/2 cup shredded carrots. I'm going to use about 1/2 cup of the green onions. I've got 1 egg here. And then I am going to use a little bit of milk. Just about 1/4 cup. And you could use regular milk, you could use almond milk, you could use hemp milk, you could use any of those. So I've got all of my wet ingredients in here, including my veggies, and I'm just gonna whisk this up. Whisk this up. You can make a big batch of these. Ideally, they're eaten right away, but I have kept them in the refrigerator and reheated them on a frying pan with coconut oil, and that has been okay too, although I will say they are best when eaten immediately. Alright, so I've got that mixed up. I've got this coconut oil pretty much over this pan here. Alright, so I'm just going to add these veggies with the milk and the egg all whisked together to a little bit of flour here. And I'm going to mix this up. This is also something fun for kind of kids to help with, especially if they really like veggies or want to help in the kitchen. Obviously, anytime you can get them involved, it's going to be more successful in getting them to get their veggies in. So this actually looks a little runny to me. I'm going to add a little bit more flour. You want it a little thicker. They're not going to take that long to cook, probably under 5 minutes. Just kind of have to continuously check them. You could also add some other veggies, like I used the yellow zucchini, but you could use a green. Alright, so I'm going to kind of scoop them. Oil's getting pretty hot. Into here and kind of try to keep them in somewhat of a circle, I guess. You want to add it in small amounts. Yeah, this batter was a little runny. I should have added a little bit more flour, but that's okay. Alright. Just want to make sure that oil is coating them. I'm going to throw this lid on to kind of help them cook a little bit faster. So, I hope you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with all these different ways to use bunching onions. I don't want anyone throwing any part of them away because they are so nutritious for you. They are loaded with things for your immune system. They're really easy to use, sometimes even easier to use than things like garlic or regular onions. They're part of that same nutrient-dense family. So try to not throw away any component of them if you can. So I'm going to let these cook for a couple minutes on one side. And then I'm just going to flip them. Some people will add a little bit more oil to make sure that they're not sticking to each other. I think I had a decent amount in there. Grab a plate. I've never tried freezing these, but I would like to try making a decent amount ahead of time to freeze them and to be able to kind of reheat as needed. I know that a lot of kids like really fun shaped pancakes, so if you could do that and sneak some veggies in your pancakes, I think that's going to be pretty successful. This is definitely more of like a savory type pancake and not so much like a sweet pancake, obviously with a bunch of syrup on it, but it is a really healthy version. Alright, you can see that was pretty fast. That used up a lot of my bunching onions, and they are going to taste pretty delicious. So I've got some carrots, some zucchini, an egg, a little bit of flour, and that kind of turned the bunching onions into more of like a main dish. But I hope that you got some ideas as far as just adding them to other things that you're probably eating every single day, if not several times a day. So thank you so much for joining us. This is Katie, the CSA coach with Shared Legacy Farms. I'm going to finish cooking up the rest of these pancakes. Check out our ebook on bunching onions below in the comments, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.